And the first thing I'd like to congratulate Diane on her election as a full member. Mike,
Not quite yet.
election to
Not
the
quite yet.
Board of Finance. And thank Mike for, I think it's almost 8 years in zoning work. So thank you for that. Service to the town, but you're continuing
Yes, sir.
in maybe a more contentious area even.
I think I fear I'm going to miss zoning greatly.
Well, we'll miss you.
Well,
Anyway, okay. So and congratulations to Bruce,
thank you.
having the re-election.
Thank you.
Now, it's okay. I got this note that says it was being live streamed, and I think once I clicked on it, I tilted the whole thing. Anyway, so let's proceed. We don't need any alternates. We have 6 regular members here. And the first order of business is the approval of the minutes of October 18th.
Well,
Anybody have any comments?
I just want to comment, but yeah, I have 4 lines where my name is misspelled again. This was really an annoyance more than anything, but I don't know why these minutes couldn't put in the dictionary of their word processing program the correct spelling of all of our names, so that when they work the minutes, it'll show up that there's a typo. When there's a typo,
I think
we did this for the last time.
switching computers, Bruce, but different people have done it. That's the problem.
Well, and Donna's name was misspelled as well as mine in the last minutes. And I mean,
Yes.
it's not that big of a deal, but it's an easy fix. And it's just sort of annoying that we have to use our time to proofread minutes for things like that.
Yep.
Okay. And then there's another thing. On line 104. Right in the middle, there's reference to special acceptance. Acceptance is not the right word. It's special exception. EXCEPTION. It's an
Good
exception.
catch. I did not see that.
That's it for me.
Okay, and I think on the absent list on line 16, I think Shannon had already resigned.
Well, the town website still shows her as an active member, so, you know, there's a little bit of an issue there.
Does it?
Anyway,
Okay.
yes, it does.
It may be that she sent it to the town clerk and it didn't get to the selectmen yet. She thinks she's resigned anyway. Okay, so the first order of business here after that is to have a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
So moved.
Moved by Mike,
Second it.
second by Ann. Any further comments or corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Absent. Okay.
I'm abstaining. I wasn't there.
Who's abstaining?
Donna's abstaining.
Donna. Okay, so it's 5-0 and 1 abstention. Donna. Okay, now the next order of business is the public hearing. And Mr. Vice Chairman, could you read the call?
Application 2124 of the Simsbury Zoning Commission, applicant Michael Glidden, CFM, CZEO, agent, application for a text amendment to the zoning regulations to opt out of Public Act 21-29 concerning accessory dwelling units and parking standards in Simsbury.
Thank you. Okay. There are a number of people here who want to speak. I'd like to ask them to limit their comments to 5 minutes. And if you have a need to go beyond that, we can circle back after everyone has had their chance.
Dave, before you start the input from the public. I
Yes,
wondered if I could raise a question so that we're all clear on what we're doing. The call to the meeting is about Public Act 2129. Is it the whole act, or is it the accessory dwelling units and parking standards and which is what's written?
it says concerning accessory dwelling units and parking standards. That's what the call says. And those are the two provisions that are provided for in the act. So there shouldn't be a question there.
There will be a question. I'll raise it when we move on to discussion among ourselves.
Okay. The second thing is that this is a public hearing for people to express their opinions for the commission, and please address those comments to the commission. It's not a forum for debate. I'm sure there'll be differing opinions, but we're here to hear them. What do I got here? Okay, the first thing I'd like before we start we'll go and have the town staff give us a short summary of the situation. And then we'll open it up to comments and questions from the commissioners. And following that, the public was invited to speak. And I have a list of people who have signed up. And if anybody is not on this list, raise your hand after we get going. Okay, Mike, can we have a little summary of?
Yeah, good evening, Mike Glidden, Director of Planning for the Town of Simsbury. So really what this is Public Act 2129. It was the zoning reorg bill. As part of the approval for that legislation, there's been some specific language as it relates to accessory dwelling units and the associated standards, both design standards and parking standards that have been modified. And one of the options that communities have is the ability to opt out if they want to develop their own regulations. So, in Simsbury, we have ADU accessory dwelling unit regulations as it stands on the books. As part of the packet that's on the materials online, there's a memorandum dated September 29th, 2021 from Laura Borkowski, the zoning officer, which kind of goes through our current section 3.52 and the legislation of Public Act 2129. Some of the just major points that are differences. One is that the Public Act that accessory dwelling units would be as of right in any zoning district versus our current regulations. If the accessory dwelling unit is attached to the house, it's subject to a site plan approval, which is not a public hearing, but it's an approval from the commission. If it's a detached unit, it's a special exception or public hearing process with the zoning commission. The law would basically say everything is as of right. There would be no approvals from the commissions. The other really kind of difference is the size. Our current regulations limit the size of accessory dwelling units to 600 square feet or 25% of the gross floor area of the house, whichever is less. The law would say that instead the cap is moved to 1,000 square feet, period. The other things is that we require separate utilities. The new law says you cannot require separate, we say that you cannot separate utilities. The new Public Act says that you cannot require having the utilities not be separated. That was a change that was made to the regs in 2018. The ADUs, the regulations allow only one per lot. It's a little different based on the district. The access, our regulations require that there'll be access from the primary residence by an operable door. The state statute says it prohibits towns from adding that into their regulations. Last is the parking. Our regulations require one off-street parking space. The state statute that would be waived, or basically say that it's not required to have more than one parking space. So those are kind of the major things. And what the intention of this is now that, a community says, if you want to regulate ADUs, and you may not want to follow these rules, that's what the public hearing is for tonight. Otherwise, if the community chooses not to opt out, those changes that are associated with Public Act 2129 come into effect, and meaning that our current ADU regulations would no longer be effective or would be inactive regulation. We would be subject to the new state statute. So that's just a brief overview.
And that would be as of January 1st, 2022. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have till 2023 to develop regulations if we opt out. So
Okay.
we have a year. We have a year to work on it. At the same time, we have a year. We could say, you know what, we're okay with the statute if we were to go down that road. But the first step would be opting out and then making that determination. It should the commission opt out, how you want to regulate it, because your regulations are very different than what's in the new Public Act.
Thank you, Mike. Commissioners, more questions or on the situation before we hear from the public?
Was Mike saying that we're going to be able to go for a year? If we vote tonight to opt out, and sometime in the coming weeks, the Board of Selectmen seconds that with an opt-out vote, then we have a year where we're using our own regulations, or we're using our own regulations for a year, and then we can opt back in, or
So you have a year to develop. So you have a year to develop regulations. But you could say that, you know what, the statute, we'll develop our regulations consistent with Public Act 2129. It's just saying that when you opt out, it gives the commission, the community freedom to basically determine how do you want to set up the regulatory structure of your accessory dwelling unit regulations.
Is that clear, Bruce?
no, but
Bruce,
why don't we move on?
As I understand it, we have to vote 2/3 majority vote to opt out, and then the selectmen have to do the same. And from my perspective, I don't see there's any reason to vote tonight. You said we could vote tonight if you, the commission, would like to, but we have until a year from January to complete this process with the selectmen. Okay.
I do have a question concerning that then.
Okay.
So if we are taking the vote to opt out, wouldn't it make sense to know or to discuss previous to that vote what our zoning regulations concerning ADUs might morph to, so that then we can make an informed vote based on what we're thinking for? Or is the vote going to be strictly based on what our current regulations are? Do you know what I'm saying?
Donna, we can vote at the time we feel like voting, anytime in the next year or so. Before, we have to give the selectmen time to vote. But yeah, we could say, okay, let's not vote until we've revised our current regulations as we
Based on what we hear and
after
right.
we hear from people. Okay,
Okay.
that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, is it clear to everybody? Anybody got any more
It's
questions?
clearer to me now, Dave, but I know the meetings where you said that it was an opt-out, an all or nothing in terms of the state statute. And I guess and then if we wanted to make some changes to our own regulations,
We can do it.
Public
in
Act
any order.
2129, we could do that, but
We could change our regs before we choose to vote. That's
right. But it isn't an all or nothing anyway.
well, it is an all or nothing as far as the statute is concerned. We
No,
have to
that's-
opt out to be able to use our own regulations.
But the Public Act provides that you can pick subsections to opt out of without opting out of the whole thing. But we don't need to settle that.
Okay. Mike, is that clear? Okay, everybody understand that? That's clear, everybody, all the commissioners? Okay,
Is now.
pardon?
I just said it is now, it wasn't before. I thought it was either in or out. I didn't realize that we could opt out of just certain provisions in that statute.
Okay,
So it's good to know.
okay, good. Are we ready to hear from the public? I think so. Okay. First person on the list that had asked to speak was Mario Ciapetti, and I saw him online a minute ago.
Yes, I'm here, Dave.
There you are.
Thank you very much. Dear Chairman Ryan and other members of the Zoning Commission, by the way, I am a resident of Weetag and have lived in Simsbury for over 20 years. So I appreciate.
When you start to speak, you please state your name and your address.
Okay, Mario Ciapetti, 2 Spruce Lane in Weetag.
Thank you.
Okay. So dear Chairman Ryan and other members of the Zoning Commission, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening regarding Public Act 21-29 and specifically the section dealing with accessory dwelling units. I understand that this legislation will go into effect unless the town chooses to opt out of the provision by January 1st, 2023, 13 months away. At the outset, I would like to let you know that I am in support of this legislation and would ask you not to vote to opt out of this legislation. This legislation provides many benefits to our town, particularly with respect to the elderly, the young, and to those in the intellectually and developmentally disabled community. Our 2017 Plan of Conservation and Development clearly stated that our town lacked few affordable housing options for first-time home buyers and for elderly residents. Our recent affordable housing plan also highlighted this issue. Public Act 21-29 provides the above population with more options than presently exists within Simsbury's existing ADUs regulations, particularly by permitting them as of right, by increasing the minimum size of the unit so that it is more livable and attractive to a renter, and by eliminating the requirement that they be attached to the primary dwelling. ARP, which is a strong supporter of ADUs, has a booklet called the ABCs of ADUs. In this guide, it lists several benefits as to why the allowance of ADUs is a positive strategy for many towns. 1, empty nesters can build an ADU and move into it, then rent out the main house for supplemental income or make it available to their adult children. 2, families with young children can use an ADU as housing for a nanny or an au pair or even a grandparent or two who can then help them raise their grandkids and be assisted themselves as they age. 3, individuals in need of care can reside in an ADU to be near family members, or they can use the ADU to house a live-in aid. In fact, ADUs can be an affordable and more comforting alternative to an assisted living facility or nursing home. 4, home buyers can look forward to the rental income from an ADU to help pay for their mortgage or finance home improvements, especially in expensive housing markets. 5, home-based workers can use an ADU as their office or workshop. 6, homeowners can use an ADU for guests or as housing for friends or loved ones who aren't yet financially independent, such as new high school or college graduates, or who need temporary housing due to an emergency or while renovating their own home, or have disabilities but can live independently if family reside nearby. While I understand that both the Zoning Commission and the Board of Selectmen need to vote to opt out of this legislation by January 1, 2023, I do not understand the rush to have this vote so quickly without a detailed discussion of the individual parts of PA 21-29. If a vote has to take place before such a discussion occurs, I ask that the Zoning Commission vote not to opt out of this legislation. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Mario. Appreciate your thoughts. Okay, the next person that's on the list is Rick Brush. Rick?
Thank you. I'm Rick Brush. I'm at 4 Elliott Drive in Simsbury, and I'm speaking on behalf of both myself and my wife, Suzanne Gordon. Good evening, Simsbury Zoning Commission. As Simsbury residents since 2002, we're adding our voices to the many community members speaking out in support of Connecticut Public Act 2129, which provides easier, fairer, and more equitable paths to accessory apartments, also known as accessory dwelling units or ADUs. We strongly urge the Zoning Commission to stand together in affirming Simsbury's full support of this important statewide legislation. It is good for our town, and it was passed through a fair and democratic process by state legislators who are acting on behalf of the people who elected them. We ask that you opt in and vote against any application to opt out of this legislation. You'll hear from many Simsbury neighbors tonight about the significant benefits and details of the new regulations. For example, expanding naturally affordable housing without sprawl that threatens our environment, helping our loved ones to live close by while maintaining their independent lifestyle, whether it's grandparents, recent college grads, or family members living with intellectual or developmental disabilities, and allowing homeowners to increase their income and their wealth by boosting resale values. Let's not let it be lost in this discussion, which can get rather technical and impersonal, that what we're really talking about are homes. We should be removing barriers and expanding opportunities for people of all ages, incomes, abilities, races, and ethnicities to call Simsbury home. This decision alone won't completely address our need for affordable housing, but it is a worthy and consequential step that sends a message to both current and prospective residents that Simsbury is open, that we're inclusive, and that we're welcoming to all. Thanks so much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate your comments. Next, we have Austin Charles Serio. Do I see him here? Well, we'll defer his slot and move to Akash Kaza. Akash?
Hi. Hi, my name is Akash Kaza. I live at 2 Nutmeg Court in Simsbury. I've been a resident for 18 years, and I'm here in support as well of Public Act 2129 and against opting out of these provisions. The two things I hear most about Simsbury and about Connecticut as a whole are, why are young people leaving and why are we struggling with our population growth? And I do believe that ADUs will help address these problems. So summer of last year, I accepted a job in Phoenix for a short term, about 6 months. And I remember the first thing I thought was, I can't really afford a bigger place. And I also can't stay for a whole year. So all those 1-year leases were pretty much off the table. What I ended up doing was finding an ADU. And actually in Phoenix, they call them casitas, but there I got to spend those 6 months exploring the area, learning about whether I wanted to live there. Ultimately, it was a little bit too hot for me, so I didn't really feel that Phoenix vibe, but it gave me an experience and ability to actually move into the area and get a feel for the area. I think that a lot of people want to live in Simsbury, but they have a lot of trouble finding where to live in Simsbury. That includes young people. It includes people of different ages and backgrounds. Instead of artificially constraining our housing stock, we should let the market decide. We should let people build housing and allow for new housing types to exist. This is an opportunity for our town to send a message of who we want to be. I think we want to be a town that accepts new residents of all ages, abilities, and we should choose to let people live in place, that if they get older and they still want to live in Simsbury, like so many people do, that there are affordable ways for them to stay in town. So when we support the creation of different types of housing, we support the inclusion of different types of people. And with these ADU provisions, we'll preserve the look and feel of town by building housing where housing exists. Ultimately, I think that ADUs are an easy and simple way of addressing some of these long-standing problems that Simsbury and Connecticut as a whole have had with population growth and have had with young people. I think for somebody like me, somebody like me who might not have grown up in Simsbury, ADUs would allow somebody an affordable way to spend some time in Simsbury and grow to love Simsbury like 25,000 people in this town do. And with that, I'm going to close by just again urging that you oppose opting out of these provisions. And I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Akash. Appreciate your comments. Next on the list is Kevin Kurian. I see him. He's down on the left on my screen. I don't know where he is on yours.
That's right. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Kurian, resident of 5 Lower Joe Way in Simsbury. I've been a resident since I was 5 years old. So first, good evening, everybody. It's so nice to see you all, be it on Zoom. First, I want to thank Chairman Ryan and all of the members of the Zoning Commission for holding this meeting so that town residents can share their thoughts on updating our accessory dwelling unit policy. You know, it speaks well to your character as local leaders that you're giving residents a platform tonight to speak on this issue. You know, I stand in firm opposition to any proposals to opt out of Public Act 2129 because I believe that expanding ADUs will benefit our town's elderly community, our town's environment, and residents with intellectual and developmental disabilities, as so many have mentioned and are going to mention verbally and via email tonight. You know, in the interest of transparency, I'd like to preface my comment by saying that I was a volunteer for Desegregate CT and advocated for the legislation that is now Public Act 29 within the Connecticut State Legislature. Because of this, I feel that I can offer a unique perspective on the policy specifics of what's being discussed today and why we should accept these moderate and common sense proposals. One of the most commendable points of the proposed changes is the increase in maximum size of ADUs from 600 square feet or 25% of the primary dwelling unit to 1,000 square feet or 30% of the primary dwelling unit. Our current regulations have created an environment where people who need to live in ADUs are made to cram into, 600 square feet living units that are smaller than most studio apartments. These provisions will give more power to the homeowners in our town to make decisions about what kind of unit best suits their property. And that's personal liberty in its finest. By opting into these reforms, we will make sure that senior citizens and members of the IDD community are housed with dignity and respect. These ADU reforms will make minor tweaks to our zoning codes. Currently attached ADUs are zoned as of right and merely require site plan approval. And these reforms would treat detached ADUs, perhaps a converted garage, a little more in line with the way we treat attached ADUs. And this seems like a pretty reasonable reform. And, if a homeowner needs an ADU for whatever reason, they only have the capacity to create a detached unit. Shouldn't they be, treated the same or similar to somebody who has an attached ADU? I think so. And I know that I'm not alone in this belief. There are a lot of really good faith concerns about what this will do to parking in our town. First, it's essential to remember that I don't think that this is going to restrict parking supply in Simsbury, as developers and people who are creating ADUs would still be able to require one parking spot per ADU. They just wouldn't be mandated to. More importantly, perhaps, we should remember the fact that many elderly occupants of ADUs might not need a car. So, we'll all still have the liberty to park where we'd like. The restriction that the towns may not require more than one parking spot per ADU is a wise one. It empowers the free market, as others have said before me, in the private sector for the better. It's essential to remember that these reforms explicitly state that towns should regulate the use of ADU short-term rentals, as well as the height, landscaping, and architectural design of these units. By collaborating together as one town, as one community, I believe that we can preserve the architectural character and what makes Simsbury beautiful while making our town more inclusive. Sometimes in discussions like these, I really think that the real question can get lost in the weeds. Today, I think we're talking about how these reforms can make our town more inclusive, accessible, and affordable for people of all ages and abilities. I strongly urge the Zoning Commission to support these common sense reforms, and I stand opposed to any form of opt-out. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much, Kevin. We appreciate your comments and your hard work. My list has no more pre-signups. So we'll ask people who are on this call, if you would like to speak, wave your hand, or Melissa Osborne.
So since I'm not seated as an alternate tonight, I just get to speak as a member of the public, correct?
Correct.
I reviewed all of the letters in preparation for tonight's meeting, and I was really struck by, in particular, Cheryl Cook's letter. And I really wanted to focus on the fact that opting out isn't a vote against inclusion. It's not a vote against expanded housing opportunity. It's a vote to allow us the opportunity to develop regulations that fit within Simsbury and that might be zone specific. There may be zones, I was reviewing the application for one of those tonight, and there are different zones within Simsbury where a detached dwelling unit, accessory dwelling unit, would have much less impact on neighbors than it might in other zones. It's very different to put a detached ADU on a 5-acre parcel than it is on an R15 parcel. And I think that opting out gives us an opportunity to consider Simsbury not just holistically, but each individual village and area and zone within our town. I very much support the goal of inclusive zoning and inclusive housing opportunities. There are lots of us here who don't fit necessarily into some of the more typical Simsbury zones, and we want opportunities for people to be able to stay, whether it's because of aging out of their own homes, divorce, illness, disability. We want those opportunities for people to stay here in Simsbury. But I also feel strongly that we know Simsbury best and that we need to take a strong look at where the dwelling units that we're talking about, the detached dwelling units, are best suited within our town.
Thank you, Melissa. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? We have about 5 or 6 other people who are present in name. Hearing none. My feeling is we should keep this public hearing open for as long as we can to encourage people to come and speak to us. Bruce, you have a comment? Bruce?
Well, I don't know if you finished your thought, Dave, but I guess I'm thinking the same thing, but I was wondering if Mike could fill in the blank here. I don't know how long you can keep this public hearing open. And I think for the interest of the people that have taken the time to join us, it would be good for them to hear, because I'm inclined to do the same thing. I think we need to have,
We can go 35 days and we can.
in my view, some serious conversations about
Bruce,
elements of that bill.
you're breaking up. We can go for 35 days and then we can extend it for 65 if we want. So I don't think there's a big rush in this situation. And I think there's a lot of good thoughts that people have put forth. And so I think it's good for us to chew on it and keep the public hearing open so that we can hear from more people in the coming meetings. So if you guys agree, I don't know, Mike.
Fine with me.
I agree.
So can I have a motion to continue the public hearing?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Mike Doyle? Anybody?
I'll second.
Second by Donna.
Mhm.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay. Carries 6-0, so we'll keep the public hearing open through our next meeting anyway. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. And your thought. I was impressed with the quality of the presentation and discussion.
Thank you very much.
logic and no heat. Thank you very much. Okay, the next order of business is we have an application 2123 of Iron Horse LLC. Mike, I think you said that the applicant would like us to table this discussion.
Yeah, the applicant is still working on finalizing comments or agreeing with the town engineer on his comments. So we still need to resolve that matter. So we're going to ask you to table this till the next meeting.
Okay, can I have a motion to table application 2123?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Mike, we're going to
I'll
miss you,
second it.
Mike. Second by Ann. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstaining, it carries 6-0. Okay. New business, I suspect that if people want to discuss 2124, we can discuss it, but since the public hearing is still open, we should table that. Get a motion to table the 2124 discussion.
Actually, Mr. Chair, you don't have to have a motion since you have the public hearing open on this matter.
Okay,
So just since the public hearing is open, we just wouldn't take action on this. So
okay,
this will come on your next agenda as old business.
okay, good. Okay, we have an application 2125 for an ADU retro approval. Someone here to speak to that? I thought I saw Catherine Sullivan in the,
She is here, and I'm Scott Glennie. I'm a real estate professional with William Pitt Sotheby's International Realty.
okay,
And Catherine Sullivan's my client, and she wasn't sure she was going to be able to make it, but I think is here. This is a essentially it's an accessory dwelling unit that meets all of the current regulations. It's been existing, we believe, since the original construction, but there's no real evidence of that. But it did predate the current ownership, which has been over 20 years. And so this has come up recently with a real estate transaction. And so we submitted the application in hopes that we can get that approved, and then that the new owners won't have any issue using it as such.
okay, they're selling the building or the house?
Pardon me?
The Sullivans are selling the house, is that what I heard?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Comments from the commissioners or questions? Bruce?
Yeah, I just want to be, I don't quite understand what the description of the application is, where it says that it's use of an existing kitchen of a 364 square foot bedroom suite as an accessory pending approval within the property. What does that mean? Pending approval within the, approval of the kitchen or something within the, I don't get it.
So this
This is
is
just an application for an ADU. I got it. If it's something more than that, I don't get it.
It's Bruce, it's
No,
just, it's an
that's what it
application
is.
for an after the fact ADU. So we have no records of when it was constructed, but since the real estate transaction is occurring, they have to legalize it. So they had to come to the commission to seek approval. And it's literally, it's a 1-bedroom apartment with a bath and kitchen. If the kitchen didn't exist, if that was removed, it wouldn't be considered an accessory dwelling unit.
So
You have some place to
today,
sleep.
we do nothing. This meets our requirements for an ADU. Is that what was said?
Correct.
The submission meets our current regulation. So
Correct.
we don't need any changes. We don't need any accommodations. We can just approve. Okay.
Correct.
I believe there's a staff report, Bruce.
I didn't see a statement, but
It was added in sometime, I think, today.
oh, well, I might have been having dinner then. Okay.
Okay, it meets all of our regulations, and it's a small
Yeah.
unit. And
And
it
it's already there.
needed approved.
And 100% of it's already in place.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Ready to make a motion on this application? I think there's a draft motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion. I move to approve application 2124. Is that the right number?
It should be 2125. I'm sorry, Kevin.
Yeah, I caught that. 2125 of Catherine Sullivan, applicant, Ed Clenny, agent, application for a site plan amendment pursuant to section 3.5 of the Simsbury zoning regulations on accessory dwelling units for the purpose of legalizing the use of an existing kitchen of a 364 square foot bedroom suite as an accessory dwelling unit pending approval. There's no pending approval. Within the property located at 45 Saddle Ridge Drive, Assessors Map B07, Block 203, Lot 006A, Zone R160. Site plan approval is subject to the following: an administrative zoning permit is required.
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any further discussion? Is that an R160 zone? Did I hear that right? 4-acre zone? Okay. Anybody have any other comments? All in favor?
No. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Are there any abstentions? Okay. Carry 6-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's taken care of. Okay, the next order of business is a discussion with Tony Giorgio. Tony Giorgio was in attendance here, I believe. I see him in the center of my screen.
I am, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. I'm glad you can see me because I'm never quite sure with all of this electronics whether anyone can see me. I'm joined this evening by Ken LaForge from F.A. Hesketh. And
good evening, everyone.
We would like to spend a few minutes with your indulgence. Once again, I'm Tony Giorgio from the Keystone Companies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission for giving us this opportunity. I don't know what's happening now. We have a blank screen, but hopefully you can hear me. Some of you may recall, and I know Commissioner Elliott does, that back in 2010-11, we created a PAD zone up at Dorset Crossing, a planned area development zone in which we were going to develop residential or mixed use project, residential, office, and retail. And here we are a decade later, and we have 166 market rate apartments. We have 48 special needs apartment, OJ Kin Commons. We have a 15,000 square foot office building. And we're faced with a market reality that's a bit frightening. I would like to chat with you about the fact that our vision as a community and as developers a decade ago has been impacted by the reality of the market. Right now, we have, and perhaps Ken, you can put up, or someone could put up the first. Right now, we're faced with a serious medical office vacancy. As you can see in Simsbury, we've got almost a 30% vacancy. In this past year, we've had a negative absorption rate of over 3,000 square feet. If you look at the Hartford area, which is kind of interesting, second slide, please. We have a significantly greater number of square feet available, a 24% vacancy, and negative absorption. That's kind of the reality of where we are with medical office in the greater Hartford area and in Simsbury in particular, which is only what we're interested in. If you go to the next and you say, well, what about commercial office? Maybe medical is not the issue. Well, with commercial office, we're looking at almost 17% vacancy, a negative absorption of over almost 9,300 square feet. And that's in Simsbury. And I might add that you don't need me to share these statistics with you. All you need to do is to drive up and down Hot Meadow to see how many of the for lease signs, for rent signs there are. It's no better in the greater Hartford area with 15.5% vacancy and 147,000 square feet negative absorption. I have been trying over the last couple of years to market Dorset Crossing and its commercial and medical office space and retail space in a way that we could fill in not only the existing 15,000 square foot building, but the better than 40 or 35,000 square feet of extra buildings that are part of the master plan. And as you can see from this graphic, we've done numerous campaigns regionally in an effort to create an awareness of what we think is one of the best office parks in the greater Hartford area. And as a result of all these activities, we have had 8 inquiries in the past year. And while that doesn't make any of us happy, when we look at what else is happening in the marketplace in terms of multifamily development, and I should add parenthetically, and maybe you could go to the next slide. I should add parenthetically that we have wanted to create the balance that we put together initially with multifamily, retail, and office. But the market has not responded. And during that same period where we had 8 inquiries concerning office and medical, commercial office or retail, we've had over 30 inquiries for multifamily and age-restricted housing at Dorset Crossing. And once again, you can see from the graphic, thousands of views and hundreds of clicks. And out of that, we've had 30 reasonable prospects who are interested in talking to us about multifamily and age-restricted at Dorset Crossing. And out of that has evolved a contract for parcels D and G, which are the 2 remaining parcels at the back of the development, where under our concept master plan, we have 72 housing units available. And you will shortly see from a out-of-state developer a beautiful project where they want to develop another 72 multifamily projects, multifamily units on those 2 parcels. Now, the reality is that when I sell those 2 pieces of land after you approve the project at site plan level of approval, I will have some land left at Dorset Crossing, which will allow me under the concept plan to do 35,000 square feet of office and 27,000 square feet of retail. And to be very candid with you, there is no market for that. I would like the commission to consider a modification in our concept master plan for us to develop more multifamily. If you look at the graphic that is now in front of you, the building to the upper right corner is where we currently have 15,000 square feet. All of the land around that is vacant. If you look to the center of the project, we have 166 market rate apartments that are at 97% occupancy. And if you look across Castle Ridge Road at Ozakian Commons, we have 48 special needs / multiple sclerosis units, 100% occupancy. And a little bit to the south of that, we have 2 vacant parcels, which will be in front of you shortly with a request for an additional 72 units. I would like to ask you to consider that we take a portion of the vacant space near the commercial office building, retaining the corner parcel, and Ken, maybe, or Mike, maybe you could show parcel F, which is the subdivided 14,500 square foot lot, which we were originally going to have a Walgreens on. Leave that as retail. And I would like you to consider allowing us to take a reconfigured lot H and allow for additional multifamily development. This is a very straightforward request. The market has shifted over the decade. Our vision for Dorset Crossing, when no one was thinking about investing in North Simsbury, has been met in part with regard to the one office building that we have and the residential. But in all honesty, the opportunity to develop the rest of Dorset Crossing to generate the kind of ratables that the community would like as additional office space just doesn't exist. And I would respectfully ask that you give us an opportunity to market, and this is a hypothetical picture of what might develop there in terms of another 75 or 80 residential units, retaining the existing office space and the existing retail space. We would respectfully ask that you give us an opportunity to modify the concept plan to add at least 75 to 80 additional multifamily so that we can complete the vision that we worked on. That's all I have to say. I'm open to any questions, but the reality is a decade has passed and the world has changed. And I need some help, and you can provide it by modifying. I know we need to go through a formal process of modifying the concept plan and bringing in a re-subdivision plan with some realities about what we want to do. But at this stage, in talking with your planner and my consultants and doing the market research, we thought it was best to at least alert you to the fact that the market has shifted. We want to continue to develop Dorset Crossing, but we need your support to change the concept master plan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you for your comments and presentation. Do the commissioners have comments on this?
Well, the reception or something on my network isn't working quite right tonight, but I just wondered if you're fairly sure, Tony, that the market data supports 70 more apartments. We have approved in the center of town for behind Vincent's funeral home. That area down there is 100. It was 200 apartments that we've approved there, and there's so much going on. We've gotten a similar feedback. It's not confidential, but the people developing Aspen Green and then the parcel where the Hartford used to be have similar to yours informally, that they hoped for mixed use development on that south parcel, but the market, they're concerned that the market isn't going to be receptive to that. So they would want to do residential. That's what they've told us. So, it's hard to sort of digest the notion that Simsbury can support all those apartments. And the last thing we want, as do the owners, is empty apartment buildings.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'd ask the same thing, Dr. Giorgio, if you had, is there a market study that actually shows there is need for more apartments Bruce just mentioned a few, but you also have new developments going on in Avon and then even in Granby, just up the street, in addition to all the Simsbury stuff. And then you see people saying that the population in Simsbury and Connecticut is decreasing, yet we just added over 1,000 units in the last few years. I just worry about getting apartments built that also aren't fillable. But having said that, we also have looked at, recognizing that there is a problem renting a lot of these places. We've modified our regs so that we allow, what was previously business
Office buildings.
properties to opened up them to more types of development. So, we are trying to work with you. So we're not saying no. We're just saying, no, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying, what can the market support? You're more in tune with that than we are. But
one of the things that I think what we're worried about is, back in the 1890s, a huge development went on in the South Boston, not South Boston, but the South End. And it wasn't until the 1970s and 1980s that those became desirable areas. It was pretty much of a slum area from the time it was developed for 60 or 70 years. And we'd hate to fall into that kind of situation, I think, is what everybody's afraid of.
Well, I think even though I'm 80 years old, I don't remember what happened in Boston in the 1880s. But I think in response to both Commissioner Elliott and Vice Chairman, none of us want to see empty buildings, and none of us want to be saddled with investments that don't work. I think one of the realities of what's happening in the marketplace is that you have two demand areas. You have young people who do not want to own single-family homes because their lifestyle is such that they like to come and go as they please. I have two of them right now who are in Mexico, and they're enjoying a week. Well, fortunately, one of them lives with me because she's left her apartment in Brooklyn, is working remotely, and the other lives on the Loomis campus where her husband is a dean and she's a psychologist. So they can kind of do their thing, but they're with four other people who are in a similar situation. They want to come and go, hop on an airplane, go to Mexico, spend the week, come back, work remotely. The other part of that demand is from people who have a little gray hair and who no longer want to be saddled with the burden of single-family home ownership and the maintenance that goes with it, and may, if they're fortunate enough, have an alternative place to spend some time during the difficult months of this New England winter, and they're looking to rent. That demand, that bifurcated demand, is far greater than the supply of housing units. Now, anyone who wants to live at Dorset Crossing is probably not the same person who wants to live on Iron Horse Boulevard and be right in the middle of downtown Simsbury. There are going to be people who are more interested in the trails, walking to Big Y, enjoying the more bucolic atmosphere of Dorset Crossing. Downtown Simsbury, and I've been, as many of you know, I've been very much a supporter of the downtown area. I think it should be developed, and I think it will be developed, and I think we need to be walking more and enjoying it. And I, for one, enjoy going to Soma Grill and all those places. But Simsbury is an extraordinarily attractive community. I don't think you can overbuild multifamily products. But I also think that if we were given an opportunity to do additional multifamily, there may be a very real opportunity to do something in the area of age-restricted housing for the older population, and maybe even look at some affordable. I don't know what the market is going to bring to me. I do know that there are over 30 people that are interested in talking to us, but I can't legitimately talk to them if I don't have the capacity. So I think it's important for you as a commission to control housing in the community. I think you should put multifamily housing in areas where it makes sense. I think North Simsbury makes sense. I think downtown makes sense. And I think on the Hartford properties where it's South Simsbury, it makes sense. Developers are going to go where the market is. We're not going to invest millions of dollars on a whim. We're only going to invest if we think it makes sense and if the market is there. And based upon my research, the market in the Farmington Valley and Simsbury and Avon in particular is extremely strong. Now, I'm not sure if I've been cut off because I'm seeing a little thing on my screen. So if you can't hear me, I apologize. But if you do hear me, would someone please let me know that you're
still hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay.
I can hear you, Tony. Yeah.
Thank you. And that's really all I have to say. I mean, we need to bring you more information. I agree to that. I just wanted to at least alert you to the fact that we're facing a market reality that we didn't see 10 years ago. Nothing would make me happier to have more retail up there and maybe one or two office buildings. But the market is not there, ladies and gentlemen. It just is not there. And with the vacancy factors that are going on throughout the greater Hartford area, and with this whole new shift in working remotely, I'm just grateful that I don't have office buildings in Hartford or in New Haven or in New York, because they're just not going to be filled. And those of us who build from the ground up, there isn't going to be any demand. And I would rather see the vision of Dorset Crossing that we all shared in a decade ago be fully developed, generating tax revenues and providing the kind of population growth that makes sense for this community. I mean, you're talking about accessory apartments, and I think that's wonderful because I do think we need to come up with new housing options. All I'm talking about is an opportunity to do more multifamily. And I can't tell you today what the market is, but I do know there's a need for age restricted, there's a need for market, and there's a need for affordable. And if people come to us with those projects, we will discuss them with your staff and we will bring them forward in a way that's pleasing and consistent with this community's vision for itself.
Mr. Giorgio, two questions. Questions and a comment, actually. You have any idea of what the impact on Squadron Line and the other schools
I was just going to say.
had from Dorset Crossing?
Yes, I can share that with you. One of the things that we discussed when we were doing this was the impact on the schools. Now, I'll be very honest with you. I've not looked at the data in the last 2 years, but the first several years of the point, which is the market rate, we had anticipated in our research that we would have 50 school-aged children in those 166 apartments. The last time I checked, there were 8. You see, the reality is that we're going to develop studios and one-bedroom apartments for the most. There may be a few 2 bedrooms, but what's happening now is that if you rent a 2-bedroom apartment, guess what the second bedroom is?
Your office.
It's an office with a pull-out couch. So if a guest comes and you want to entertain that guest, you have it, but it's basically an office. There's no market for 3 and 4-bedroom apartments, which is good news, because that's where you're going to end up with a lot of children. I will certainly, before I come back to you with a formal request, verify the number of school-aged children in the point, but I would be surprised if we have more than maybe a dozen kids. I mean, I see them every day. People are out there walking their dogs on my open space, and with my little signs that say, please don't walk your dogs, but carry a bag. Most of them carry a bag, but I don't see any kids. I really don't see any kids. That would be the only way I can answer it, Commissioner.
It's interesting.
Thank you. And then on to the comment, and I would be remiss if I didn't share it. I had the pleasure and privilege of walking around many of the neighborhoods in Simsbury in a campaign that I was successful in winning. And literally the most common theme of the folks that actually came to the door and were willing to talk for 2 seconds was apartments. And everybody was going, why are we building so many apartments in town? I get it, right? You have a piece of property that you want to develop and are looking for opportunities to do so. And I shared that with as many folks that would listen, but still the property owners in town, many of the property owners in town struggle with the number of apartment units that have been built already. And I get it, they're all sold, right? And that was my first comment was, look, if it wasn't right, they wouldn't be full, and they're all full. All right. To your point, you're at 100% or 90% of occupancy, but there's still a strong consensus out there of, why are so many apartments coming to Simsbury? And I just share that as anecdotal information for you. I don't need a response. I literally fumbled my way through, and I got better, obviously, as I went along, but a bunch of different times, probably 50 or 60 different times. It was a significant number of the conversations that I got to have going door to door.
May I comment? Is that all right with you?
Of course, please.
I think that there's a natural aversion to those of us who are private property owners and who take pride in our single family homes to think about apartment dwellers for several reasons. One, I think the pure mass of an apartment building and its impact, and I won't necessarily dwell on any particular project that has recently developed in Simsbury, but the mass is offsetting. It's scary. It's not urban. It's not suburban. It's more urban. And I think when people see that, if I can go back to the chairman's earlier point about Boston, all those tenement buildings were built and then they became eyesores, and it's only through gentrification that they're nicer. I think people are worried that the character of their community is going to change with apartment buildings. But I think what's fascinating about it is that if you do a on-the-ground survey of the people who are renting apartments in Simsbury and Avon and Farmington, you're going to be very surprised at the demographic. It's not what our emotional concern is about multifamily housing. And it's not because the apartments that are being developed are frankly designed for today's market, which are single individuals that have roommates, and retired people who are looking for an alternative way. We're not dealing with masses of individuals who are trying to cram, and I have to admit, I'm sure my ancestors in Hartford, where there were multiple families living in tenements, had a lot of people living in those tenements. We're not talking about tenements. But on the other hand, we can't say to the citizens that you chatted with that their concerns aren't legitimate. Of course, they're legitimate. But I think the biggest litmus test is to walk through or drive through the multifamily communities that you have in Simsbury and notice who the people are that are living there. And I think that your concerns or their concerns will be greatly mollified. As I said, the data is pretty clear when we did the 166 units of Dorset Crossing, I think it was the first multifamily project in Simsbury in I don't know how many decades. And the biggest concern was, oh my God, what's going to be the impact on our community and our schools? The reality is that the impact has been de minimis. And I would venture to guess that that's also true for the project that was done on the Hartford property across from the firehouse, and may or may not be as true for the project on the Avon Simsbury line. That's a slightly different product. And I think that the number of bedrooms in those units might be a little bit different. And that's the key. In all honesty, that's the key. If you do majority of studios in one bedrooms and a few two bedrooms, you're going to manage the population that moves into those units. And that's all people are concerned about. It's not the multifamily project per se, it's who's going to be moving in. And you know what? As I said earlier, I'm 80 years old, and there are very few things that surprise me anymore. But the market is the market, and I know the people that want to move to Simsbury are most of the people that already live in Simsbury, and they want to sell their houses, and they want to stay in Simsbury, and they want a nice place to move. When you see the Tapestry project, which we have on the two last parcels in Dorset that are already approved for the 72 units, we're talking about townhouses with 2 bedrooms and a den and a kitchen and undercar garages. And we're talking about flats on top with 1 and 2 bedrooms. We're talking about a beautiful product that I guarantee you probably 75% of the people that occupy them are going to be people who currently own single family houses in Avon, Farmington, and Canton, because there's no such product out there right now. That's all I can say.
That's awesome. Thank you. The one thing that I could never come back with was, how is it going to impact the value of my home in the future, right? And my answer was, I don't have a crystal ball, so I couldn't tell you. But that one's a challenge.
Well, look at it this way. The value of the homes in Simsbury and Avon and Farmington went through a period of devaluation prior to the pandemic, only because people couldn't sell their houses. During the pandemic and after the pandemic, the value of houses has accelerated exponentially. It had nothing to do with the number of multifamily units that were in the marketplace. It had to do with the demand for single family homes. Simsbury and Avon and Farmington and Canton are always going to be attractive. What we need is more business growth so that there are jobs created so that people want to move. I have a very dear friend, Bill Ferrigno, who's building in Simsbury, Sunlight Construction. He has 35 contracts laid out there in Castlebridge Crossing from people who want to build a house in Simsbury. I would say 60% of them are people who've moved in from New York and other places because they no longer want to live in those cities. They can work remotely. And that may be the secret to our success in the suburbs. As long as people can work remotely, they're going to want to stay here. Now, single women like my daughter, she wants to rent a house or an apartment because she wants to work remotely in Manhattan. She doesn't want to own a house. But if she finds the right guy and gets married, she's going to want to buy a house, but she's still going to work remotely. And most of these companies are paying their employees New York and Boston-based wages to work from Connecticut or Arizona or wherever because they need their employees. This is a changing market. And I guess I would say to the people that elected you, all the old norms are not necessarily normal anymore. We need to look at the changing reality of the workplace. And if we can have more people working from the greater Hartford area in businesses, we will be better off than we have been in the past. We need to create and retain jobs, and that's going to keep property values up.
Well,
Unfortunately, before I became a real estate developer, I was an economist, and every once in a while that those pie charts come out and all those demand curves come out. So I apologize for rambling, but I'm trying to answer your question.
Oh, no, wonderful, thank you. And just as a incoming finance member, thank you for helping to build the grand list.
Oh, you're welcome. I want to do more.
Okay, it's the first I realized that you were an economist. So my question is, what's on the other hand?
The other hand is when I used to be able to throw a curve, I was much more able, but now that I have a rotator cuff that's destroyed, I can't throw the curve anymore. That was very clever. I'm impressed by that, Chairman Ryan. On the one hand, it's this. On the other hand, I know. It's great. Do you have any questions? Any other questions?
Anybody? Any other?
Well, I'll ask some questions about the current commercial site, which is pretty empty. Have you talked with the EDC at all? I mean, have you shared any of your concepts with them? Because one of the things they were talking about, and I don't think our EDC guy is on here today, was some kind of shared office space. Even if you're working from home, there may be occasions when you want office space, either for a conference room or some other use. And is that a possibility for some of your offices? People don't want to necessarily rent for a year, but can they sort of condoize or share in office space?
The answer is I have not. And the second answer is I'll be on the phone tomorrow morning because I have fully built out space. St. Francis is still there on some space, and my office is there. But we have beautiful space that could be utilized. One of the things that I'm finding is that with Tapestry wanting to develop these new projects, the ones that I mentioned earlier, they're probably going to utilize some of the space for their leasing and construction offices. But I have more than enough space, and I will get on the phone tomorrow morning with your EDC chairman. And
if Mike's on, maybe he can help you here too, because I know he's part of that discussion. Mike Glidden.
Oh, yeah, I know Mike Glidden.
Yeah, he's on the call. Yeah. But if he has some ideas on that too, because empty space doesn't do anybody any good.
No, empty space is not comfortable, particularly when you're still paying the mortgage.
Yeah.
But that's okay. Life, listen, some days chicken, some days feathers. That's the nature of this business. But I certainly hope that I've made my case for you to consider us approaching you more formally with a modification of our master concept plan. I'd like to be able to add some additional residential units and see what the market does. Nothing gets approved, obviously, until you all get a chance to look at it. But right now, after Tapestry is done with parcels G and D, I'm out of residential capacity and I've got a lot of empty commercial office and retail space, and there's just no market. So I'm appealing to you to at least consider it. And unless there's very strong objection, I would like to put a formal application in at your next meeting and have a full discussion about it.
Thank you. Thank you, Tony. And we have, I think at Mike Glidden's suggestion 6 or 7 months ago, started looking at what about office space that's underutilized. And we have made modifications to our regs to try to make that more palatable, more usable, saleable. And I think most of the people on the commission are anxious to hear what you might be able to come up with. I think today's affordable housing is one of those things that seems to have a lot of push behind it. And I would encourage you to consider that.
Well, I certainly will, Mr. Chairman. And, I think Simsbury has done a great job with its affordable housing, workforce housing regulation. And anyone that has approached that, well, of those that have approached us and will approach us, we certainly will make them aware of that. Right now, my hands are tied because I can't tell them, well, there's an additional capacity of 80 or 90 units, and what can you do with it? Right now, Tapestry out of Minneapolis is going to use up the remaining 72 units that I have approved under the concept plan. So anything going forward, hopefully we can do it in a way that's pleasing to both Simsbury and to a developer and to ourselves. That's all I can promise.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's move on to short-term rentals, Mike.
So the Board of Selectmen approved the new short-term rental ordinance, which will come into effect in January of 2022. One thing that this commission needs to address is we will, obviously it's going to be an ordinance, a registry process with enforcement teeth on that. It's a use that's not called out in your regulations. We're going to have to add that as a use. Whether it's permitted as of right, permitted by site plan, et cetera. I know in the past, the commission had a kind of draft regulation, but it's been about probably 18 months to almost 24 months since we had that conversation.
Yes.
It's something that we should tackle and probably, try to get on our radar to finish for January, if possible.
We did have a draft, and we probably ought to see if we can formulate that into something that would fit in our regulations. And then we need to set up a public hearing. So why don't you take that on to put the draft together, and maybe we should do a public hearing before the ordinance goes into effect. Should we not?
It would be ideal that we do a public hearing before it becomes effect in January. But if we can't get to it till your first meeting in January, you meet once in January, we may be able to time the effective date just as we process applications. We have at least one person that has expressed interest and would like to discuss the permitting process so far.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners? We had to enable ADU or short-term rentals in our regs in order for them to apply for a permit from the selectmen.
Well, let me just offer one, and that is that as was just pointed out, there's some interest in having short-term rentals as a by right use of your property. We're getting increasing pressure to make ADUs a by right, whether it's attached or detached. It's my opinion that we are not headed in the right direction if we're going to allow people both an ADU and a short-term rental in the same property. I don't think that's good. So keep that in mind. And it wasn't in the draft, but
Right.
They weren't in that draft document that's been approved.
I think the constraint in the number of units was built into the ordinance.
Well, you also have to be aware that the state, the 2129, the Public Act we're looking at now, requires that that makes, it says that you can regulate the ADU as a short-term rental. They allow that.
Right.
But it doesn't speak to a situation where our ADUs are going to have a permit process and a permit that expires, and that's prohibited under the state 2129. So
2124.
we're not going to want it all in one deal. It's just going to be a scrambled eggs kind
Okay, well, let Mike do his thing and then we'll take it up next meeting.
Okay. So I'll have a draft ready in 2 weeks.
Okay. Okay. I think we're at the end of the line for the evening.
I started this journey, my first meeting with an accessory dwelling unit, and I ended my journey with an accessory dwelling unit and a very interesting discussion about accessory dwelling units. And I've had many interesting accessory dwelling unit discussions along the way. And I don't look forward to the tasks that you guys have. You have a couple of very big issues on your plate, and I will be thinking of you, and I'd be checking in at a minimum to see how you guys are doing with all of this fun stuff. And it has genuinely been an honor and privilege to work shoulder to shoulder with all of you, even though we haven't been shoulder to shoulder for the last 18 months. We have been in this quonky, wonky way. And Diane, I'd love to say that you have big shoes to fill, but they're only 10 and a half. So you got this.
Well, thank you, Mike. We've enjoyed having you, and just send us money.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
I think we need to let Mike do the adjournment motion. Yeah. His last chance.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Second by Donna. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Good night.
6-0. We're adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay.